Hello guys, today we're going to discuss the types of chemical reactions. This corresponds to section 11.2 in your textbook, and we're just going to talk about the 5 major reaction types that you see mostly in chemistry. Now there are actually 6. The 6th one is a neutralization reaction, but we won't deal with that until we get into chapter 19. So our 5 types of reactions, we have synthesis and combination reactions, decomposition, single replacement, double replacement, and combustion. Our first type of reaction is the synthesis reaction, but before we talk about that one in detail, I want to mention a couple of parts of a chemical reaction. One, in a chemical equation, you have 2 types. You have a balanced equation and an unbalanced equation. Balanced equations have coefficients, these big numbers here. All equations have an arrow or some sort in the middle that separates the reactants from the products. The reactants are on the left side and the products are on the right side. The reactants are the things that you start out with, so say flour, sugar, butter, and the products are the things that you make, like say a cake. So for a synthesis reaction, you typically see 2 things on the reactant side, but only 1 thing on the product side. Meaning you're taking 2 elements or an element in a compound, or even sometimes 2 compounds, and you're just making 1 thing on the opposite side. Synthesis reaction, the word synthesis means to synthesize or to make. So when we talk about the word synthesis, the reason that this reaction is called that is because you're making 1 thing on the other side. This particular reaction is also sometimes called a combination reaction because you're combining 2 different elements to make your product on the opposite side. The opposite of a synthesis reaction is a decomposition reaction, okay? And this is where you break something up. Decomposition reactions, you start with 1 thing on one side and you get 2 things on the other side. These reactions are very difficult to do, typically, and they usually require enzymes, bacteria, heat, electricity, something to make it fall apart. It doesn't usually happen naturally. So sometimes in those equations, you'll see some sort of sign, or when you're reading the word problem, it'll say we added heat or we added electricity. That's how that happens. This is an unbalanced equation here. You see no coefficients. And this is an example because of a decomposition reaction, because you can see that on this side of the reaction, you have a single compound, and on the opposite side, it's broken up into multiple parts. Our next type of reaction is a single replacement reaction. And this is the one that I explained in class when we discussed it, more like a set of friends going to prom together. And then when they get there, one of the friends sees someone that they really have a crush on, and they wind up spending a lot of the time with the friend they have, with the guy or the girl that they have a crush on. So in this particular reaction, we have 2 things on one side, this and this, a compound and an element, and on the other side, you make a new compound and a new element. Same thing here, you have a compound and an element, and on the other side, you have a compound and an element. The difference between these 2 is in the first one, the C was a metal, and it replaced the spot where the A was, and the A is free now. In the second one, the D is a non-metal, so something like fluorine, bromine, iodine, chlorine, and it is now replacing a non-metal, so it's in the back end position. A good example of this is zinc plus silver nitrate gives us zinc nitrate plus silver. The zinc substituted the silver, and on the other side, now the silver is by itself. The next type of reaction is a double replacement reaction. So this is where you have 2 sets of just friend couples going to prom, and they wind up switching dates. Now there's rules to this, and we'll talk a little bit more about those later. Typically with double replacement reactions, there has to be some chemistry going on. So what I mean by that is you have to make something new. Usually something new is a gas or a precipitate of some type. So in this case, you start out with A and B and C and D, and at the end you have AD and CB. Note that whatever's in the front of this reactant remains in the front. and the things that are in the back remain in the back. The only thing that they did was switch who they were paired with. They're in the same position though, if you will. So nonmetals will still act like nonmetals and come at the end of a compound, and likewise metals will switch and they will remain at the beginning of a new compound. Good example of this is magnesium bromide plus potassium hydroxide will yield potassium bromide and magnesium hydroxide. In this case, you can kind of see that the tail ends switched. This particular reaction is unbalanced, meaning it doesn't have any coefficients, and this is why some of you who are very astute or you're paying very close attention realize that the 2 is missing here. Okay, and it's not missing, it's not supposed to be there, but we'll talk more about that in the balanced reactions video. Our last type of reaction is called a combustion reaction, and that's what we talk about when we think about our car engines or a fire or anything that goes boom, and all of those require oxygen. So one of the key features in a combustion reaction is that you're always going to see oxygen as a reactant. It could be a single element combining with oxygen to form a oxide, or it could be a carbon-hydrogen compound combining with oxygen to produce a carbon dioxide and water compound. Whenever you form carbon dioxide and water, it's called a complete combustion. Good examples of each of these. The first one, magnesium plus oxygen gives you magnesium oxide. And the second one is when you have ethane. I'm sorry, that's not correct. Ethene. You have ethene plus oxygen gives you carbon dioxide and water. These two are both balanced equations. So that's it for today. Just know that there are 5 types of reactions that you need to know. Synthesis, also called combination, decomposition, single replacement, double replacement, and combustion. See you next time.